It starts with a sound you've heard 1,000 times before. The faint clink of a copper coin landing in your hand. Insignificant. Ordinary. A simple Abraham Lincoln. 1-cent coin from the Philadelphia Mint. But what if I told you that one of these almost forgotten coins, struck in 1964, could be worth more than most people's homes? Yes, a single 1-cent piece. Appraised and sold for over $812,000. The question is why? And more importantly, could one of yours be next? To understand the mystery of the 1964 no mintmark Lincoln 1-cent coin, we have to go back, not to the coin itself, but to the era that created it. The year was 1964, and America in transition. President Johnson had taken office after Kennedy's assassination. The country was shifting from silver to clad coinage, and the U.S. Mint was drowning in a nationwide coin shortage. Every cent mattered, quite literally. Millions of Americans hoarded coins, convinced that silver's removal would make older pieces skyrocket in value. Coin collecting wasn't just a hobby, it was a national obsession. Newspapers ran stories about hidden treasures in your pocket change. Families dumped piggy banks across dinner tables, looking for their chance at history. And in the middle of that frenzy, the Philadelphia Mint, the oldest mint in the nation, struck more than 2.6 billion Lincoln cents. Most were ordinary, but a few weren't. You see, Philadelphia coins carried no mint mark at the time. That was standard. But something about the 1964 run stands apart from almost every other year. For decades, collectors whispered about certain era coins, Lincoln cents with unusual metal compositions, double dies, or experimental strikes created as the mint tested new alloy mixtures to combat rising copper prices. In 1964, the government was testing everything: copper-zinc ratios, die-pressure adjustments, even alternate planchets meant for foreign contracts. Some numismatists believe that a tiny handful of 1964 Lincoln cents were accidentally struck on bronze planchets intended for earlier years, or even on experimental brass prototypes. Those subtle differences, almost invisible to the naked eye, and it could turn a 1-cent coin into a 6-figure treasure. Imagine holding a small copper disc that survived 6 decades of circulation, hiding in a drawer or a coffee tin, while its secret composition quietly defied the odds. But the mystery doesn't stop with metallurgy. The die varieties of 1964 are a world unto themselves. There are examples showing strong doubling on Lincoln's ear, on the word liberty, and across the date. Minute imperfections that happened when dies were rehubbed or misaligned during production. To most people, these are invisible. But to a trained collector, they are signatures, clues left behind by the minting process. And when those clues line up just right, the market takes notice. A verified 1964 Lincoln 1 cent with a rare double die, obverse and flawless mint luster, once sold for over $800,000. The buyer wasn't just purchasing copper, they were purchasing history, rarity, and a tangible piece of America's industrial soul. Here's a thought. Why do people pay millions for a coin that's technically still worth 1 cent? Because coins are more than metal. They're relics of moments. They're proof that something small can carry the weight of an entire nation's memory. Each coin tells a story of politics, of craftsmanship, of mistakes and miracles. And for collectors, those stories are worth more than gold. The psychology behind coin collecting is fascinating. At its core lies a paradox. Collectors chase rarity, but also crave connection. When they hold an old Lincoln cent, they're not just holding a coin, they're holding the passage of time itself. Maybe it passed through a child's hands on a summer afternoon in 1964, spent on an ice cream cone. Maybe it jingled in a soldier's pocket before he left for Vietnam. Or maybe it sat untouched for 50 years in a banker's drawer, waiting for someone curious enough to look closer. That curiosity, that small, persistent question of, what if, is what fuels the modern numismatic market. And speaking of the market, it's shifting in ways that few could have predicted. 10 years ago, only a handful of specialized dealers traded in high-grade Lincoln cents. Today, auction houses like Heritage and Stack's Bowers report record-breaking bids for coins that once gathered dust in cigar boxes. Why? Because as tangible assets rise in prestige, rare coins offer something no digital investment ever can: authenticity you can touch. The wealthy aren't just buying coins, they're buying legacies. And the 1964 Lincoln cent, especially the no-mint-mark Philadelphia strike, has become a quiet obsession for those who understand what's hiding beneath its copper-red glow. Now, here's where the story takes a twist. In 1965, the mint officially ended the use of mint marks for a few years to discourage coin hoarding. But the 1964 Philadelphia cents were already circulating, billions of them. So, how do you find the right one? Experts say the difference can be microscopic. A particular shade of luster, a dye marker near the T in Liberty, or a slight misalignment of Lincoln's profile. Some collectors even use spectroscopic analysis to determine the exact metal composition, looking for those elusive non-standard alloys. So the next time you come across a 1964 cent that seems different, heavier, redder, unusually sharp, don't dismiss it. You might be holding one of the rarest variants ever to escape the mint. Let me paint a picture. An unassuming retiree in Pennsylvania, a lifelong metal detector enthusiast, decided to sift through a jar of old coins from his father's desk. Most were ordinary, but one 1964 Lincoln cent caught his eye. Its color was deeper, the strike unusually bold. He sent it to be graded. Weeks later, he received a call. His coin had been authenticated as a proof strike in circulation condition, a test piece that somehow escaped official destruction. It sold for nearly $750,000 at auction. Stories like that are what keep collectors searching, night after night, magnifying glasses in hand, chasing ghosts of the mint's past. You might wonder, are these stories rare exceptions or signs of something larger? The truth is, rarity isn't always about quantity. Sometimes it's about context. A 1964 coin in pristine red mint state condition, meaning untouched, untoned, and fully lustrous, can fetch thousands, even without known errors. Why? Because billions were made, but very few survived without wear. Copper, unlike silver, reacts to the environment. It darkens, spots, and dulls. So every flawless 1964 Lincoln cent that remains today is a survivor of time itself. Here's a secret most casual collectors don't know. The next great discovery in American coinage probably won't come from a museum or a mint archive. It will come from someone's kitchen drawer. Coins like the 1964 no-mint-mark Lincoln cent remind us that treasure doesn't always glitter. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, under decades of routine and neglect. That's why seasoned numismatists talk not just about value, but about potential. A coin's worth isn't fixed. It's an evolving story, shaped by discoveries, demand, and the mysteries time has yet to reveal. Think about it. In the 1980s, the 1955 double-die Lincoln cent was worth a few $100s. Today, pristine examples can exceed $50,000. Market perception changes as knowledge deepens. So what happens when a new variety of the 1964 cent is authenticated? When new research uncovers another batch of misstruck or experimental planchets? That's when collectors who already own them become legends. And perhaps that's the real allure of this coin. Not just its monetary value, though $12,000 is certainly persuasive, but what it represents, the chance for an ordinary person to uncover something extraordinary. The idea that in a world of digital everything, a simple copper coin can still hold the power to surprise, to reward, to connect us to our history. When you pick up a 1964 Lincoln cent, you're holding a time capsule, a moment when America was changing, when the mint was innovating under pressure, and when a small mistake could make history. So here's a challenge. Tonight, pull out that old jar of change. Spread it across the table under a bright light. Look closely at every 1964 Lincoln cent you find, especially those with no mint mark. Check for sharp details, deep color, and any sign of doubling. Feel its weight in your palm. That's not just a coin. That's a mystery 6 decades in the making, and who knows? Maybe your next discovery will be the one that writes the next chapter in American numismatic history. Because in the end, every collector is chasing more than value. They're chasing a story, the kind that lasts longer than wealth itself. The 1964 no mint mark, Lincoln 1 cent, from the Philadelphia. Mint isn't just a coin worth $812,000. It's a reminder that history rewards the observant, and that sometimes the most ordinary things in life hold the most extraordinary secrets. Imagine standing in line at a corner store, a handful of change resting in your palm, dull copper, nicked edges, forgotten metal. Among them, a single 1 cent coin from the Denver Mint, minted in 1970. You hand it over without thought. But what if that small, unassuming coin was worth more than your home, your car, even your retirement fund? That's not fantasy. That's the quiet reality of one of the most extraordinary discoveries in modern American numismatics. The 1970 D. Lincoln 1 cent coin, a humble piece of copper that, in rare cases, carries a story valued at over $800,000. Every collector, whether novice or seasoned investor, knows that coinage is not just currency. It's memory, history, and the echo of a nation's soul pressed into metal. But what turns an ordinary coin into a generational treasure? Sometimes it's a mistake. In the case of the 1970 D. Lincoln 1 cent, the key lies in one of the most fascinating production blunders ever made by the United States Mint. A double-die obverse, where the coin's front design was accidentally struck twice, slightly out of alignment. That small, nearly invisible error, that trembling shadow in the word liberty, that doubled curve in God We Trust, transformed a common coin into a legend. Picture the Denver Mint in 1970. America was in transition. The Vietnam War raged on. Apollo 13 tested human will, and inflation quietly gnawed at the nation's pocket. The Mint was producing billions of 1 cent coins, each made from a modest copper alloy. The machines roared with relentless rhythm, striking dies against planchets at breathtaking speed. But in one fleeting moment, human precision faltered. A die intended for the obverse, Abraham Lincoln's solemn profile, received a faint second impression. The result? A doubling effect so subtle that most would never notice. Thousands of coins rolled out before the mistake was caught. Most disappeared into circulation, lost to time, used to buy soda or newspapers. But a few, a rare, precious few, survived. For decades, these doubled die coins went unnoticed, buried in coffee cans, mason jars, and junk drawers across America. Then, in the early 2000s, collectors began to take a closer look at their old change. One day, a coin dealer in California found a 1970 D. Lincoln 1 cent with odd lettering. The words seemed to echo, like a shadow frozen in metal. Upon verification, it was confirmed. A genuine 1970 D double die obverse, a rare error of stunning clarity. The market responded like wildfire. Coin collectors, investors, and historians began scouring their collections. Auctions that once moved quietly now buzzed with fierce competition. A single specimen sold for over $30,000. Another, preserved, in near-perfect condition, crossed the staggering threshold of $800,000 in private valuation. How could a single cent become worth nearly $1 million? Because rarity, when combined with story and condition, becomes art. But there's something deeper here. The 1970 D doubled die Lincoln. 1 cent represents more than a printing error. It's a symbol of what collectors truly chase. The possibility of hidden wealth, the thrill of discovery, the idea that the extraordinary might be resting in their own hands. You see, coin collecting is not just accumulation. It's archaeology of trust, faith that what was once common can become priceless through time, patience, and knowledge. Collectors know this instinctively. They feel it when they hold a coin, older than themselves, when they trace the curve of Lincoln's profile, or when they glimpse the faintest imperfection that could change everything. And yet, Even among the initiated, the 1970D remains a mystery. Many confuse it with the 1970S, a San Francisco mint issue that also bears doubling but is far more common. The Denver variant, however, stands apart, far rarer, often cleaner in strike, and shrouded in obscurity for decades. Here's where it gets intriguing. Experts believe that fewer than 50 confirmed examples of the true 1970D doubled die exist today. Compare that to the millions of standard Denver minted cents from that same year. The odds are astronomical, like finding a needle in a mountain of copper haystacks. But that doesn't stop the search. In fact, it fuels it. Collectors across the country now comb through rolls of 1970D Lincoln cents, purchased by the thousands from estate sales, bank vaults, and old family collections. Some spend sleepless nights under magnifying lamps, eyes straining for that ghostly doubling around Lincoln's eye or the word liberty. Because if they find it, if they see that unmistakable shadow, it could change everything. There's a quiet magic in this pursuit. Numismatics is in many ways a mirror of human ambition. We seek meaning in the overlooked. We give value to what others dismiss. The 1970D doubled die is a testament to that spirit, a reminder that even a coin meant for a single cent can hold a story worth more than gold. But let's take a step back. Why does the market value such errors so highly? It's not merely about rarity. It's about intent versus accident, the tension between human perfection and human flaw. The mint strives for uniformity, yet every so often a sliver of imperfection escapes the machinery of control. Collectors see beauty in that flaw. Investors see opportunity. Historians see narrative. And all three are right. One might ask, why does a small piece of copper matter so much in the age of digital currency and contactless payments? Because tangible value never truly disappears. As the world grows more virtual, the physical, the tactile, becomes sacred. Holding a coin from 1970 isn't just possession, it's connection to a time, to craftsmanship, to a national legacy. Each mark, each groove tells a story. The hum of the Denver Mint's presses, the human hands that bagged them, the cashier who unknowingly passed one across a counter 50 years ago. To a collector, that's not just metal. That's memory made eternal. Still, the question lingers. Could there be more of these elusive treasures still out there, hiding in jars, drawers, and forgotten piggy banks across America? The answer is yes. Every few years, a new specimen surfaces, sometimes in the most unexpected places. A retired teacher in Illinois once found one in her late husband's coin collection, thinking it was just another cent. A young collector in Pennsylvania discovered one in a roll purchased for under $10. Both coins, when authenticated, fetched life-changing amounts at auction. It's not impossible, it's improbable, and that's what makes it irresistible. Here's the secret the market doesn't tell you outright. The value of these coins isn't static. It evolves. When gold prices rise, the wealthy diversify into tangible historical assets, and rare coins, especially those with captivating stories, become safe havens of prestige and permanence. A 1970D doubled die isn't just a collectible. It's a status artifact, a conversation between the past and the present, between human error and timeless worth. Today, with numismatic markets surging and vintage American coins gaining global recognition, the mystique around this Denver minting era continues to grow. If you think $808,000 is a high watermark, imagine what happens when one day a pristine, uncirculated, mint-state specimen appears. Experts predict it could easily cross the $1 million threshold. There's an almost poetic irony in it, isn't there? A coin created to represent 1 cent, the smallest denomination in circulation, now holds the potential to rewrite financial destiny. And yet perhaps that's the lesson hidden within it. Value isn't always assigned by the system that created it. Sometimes, value is born from the hands that recognize it. The collector who sees not just copper, but character. Not just age, but story. Not just currency, but legacy. So if you ever find yourself rolling coins, sorting through change, or cleaning out an old jar from a relative's attic, look closer. Examine the date, 1970. Check for the small D mint mark beneath the year, the mark of Denver. And under a magnifying glass, study the letters in Liberty, the phrase, "In God we trust." If they seem doubled, if Lincoln's eye carries a ghostly second outline, you might just be holding one of America's most valuable numismatic secrets. Because sometimes the universe hides its treasures in plain sight, not in vaults or banks, but in the quiet hum of history, waiting for someone patient enough, curious enough, and wise enough to notice. That's the real power of coin collecting. It's not about possession. It's about perception. And perhaps that's why, even in an age of artificial intelligence and digital wealth, the 1970 Lincoln 1-cent coin endures as a symbol of enduring truth. That worth is not always minted. By design, sometimes it's born by accident and discovered by those who still believe in looking closely. So, the next time you feel the weight of change in your pocket, pause. That small coin, tarnished, overlooked, ordinary, might carry more than copper. It might carry a story waiting for you to uncover, a story worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and perhaps something even rarer, the joy of rediscovery. Because somewhere out there, hidden in a handful of coins, is the next 1970 D doubled die, and maybe, just maybe, it's waiting for you to find it. They say the most valuable treasures aren't hidden in vaults or buried in the earth. They're already in your hands. And somewhere in a dusty jar, a forgotten drawer, or the palm of an unsuspecting collector, there may rest a single Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin from the San Francisco Mint, dated 1971, a piece so deceptively ordinary that it could be mistaken for spare change, yet known to command a staggering market value that has reached over $800,000. How could a humble copper coin, barely worth a cent, when it left the mint, transform into one of the most sought-after artifacts in American numismatic history? The answer begins with imperfection, precision, and a mystery that only time could uncover. In 1971, the San Francisco Mint was a place of transformation. America was changing. The Vietnam War was on every front page, inflation was on the rise, and trust in institutions was faltering. Yet inside those secure walls, artisans and technicians labored to produce billions of coins for a restless nation. Among them, the Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin, struck from a copper alloy that had served since 1909, honoring the nation's 16th president, rolled off the presses by the millions. But this particular year, something unusual occurred. During production, a few proof coins, those mirror-finished masterpieces intended only for collectors, were struck with extraordinary precision using dies from the San Francisco Mint, marked with the iconic S. Yet a handful of these proof dies were never supposed to strike circulation planchets. And when they did, they created anomalies so rare that even seasoned collectors hesitated to believe they existed. Somewhere between art and accident, a handful of 1971 S-proof Lincoln cents were minted with doubling, subtle, ghost-like impressions around the words, Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date itself. A second strike, a fraction of a millimeter off, captured a perfect shadow of history. Now, to the untrained eye, it's nothing. Just another old penny, reddish-brown, slightly worn, perhaps darkened by years in circulation. But to the trained collector, those doubled letters shimmer like hidden runes. This is what numismatists call a doubled die obverse, and it is the mark of a phenomenon that rarely escapes the mint floor. The 1971 S doubled die Lincoln cent is not just an error, it's a whisper from the machinery of the past, a secret encoded in copper. Fewer than a handful are known in gem-proof condition, and when one appears at auction, collectors from around the world take notice. In recent years, a pristine specimen graded PR 69 by a leading certification service fetched an astounding $804,000, a coin once meant for collectors. Albums suddenly became an icon of wealth and legacy. But why does this happen? Why does something as small as a misaligned die send shockwaves through the coin market? It's about rarity, yes, but it's also about psychology. Collectors chase perfection, yet they fall in love with imperfection. The doubled die era represents both, the mechanical flaw and the human story behind it. Each one becomes a frozen moment of the mint's fallibility, and of America's. For the investor, it's a tangible hedge against uncertainty. For the historian, it's a relic of industrial art, and for the dreamer, it's proof that even the smallest, simplest object can contain infinite possibility. Imagine this. You're sorting through an old collection, a box your father kept in the garage, or a jar your grandmother used to fill with change for Sunday treats. The coins spill across the table, copper, nickel, silver, each carrying a lifetime of fingerprints. You lift one, a 1971 Lincoln cent. You turn it in the light. The letters Liberty appear to ripple. In God We Trust seems to echo itself. Is it your imagination? Or have you just uncovered one of the rarest modern proof cents ever struck? That moment, that heartbeat of discovery, is why collectors keep searching. The story of this coin doesn't exist in isolation. It's part of a lineage of great American numismatic anomalies. Coins like the 1955 doubled die cent, the 1969 S with its dramatic doubling, or the legendary 1909 SVDB, the very first Lincoln cent struck with designer Victor David Brenner's initials. Each one was born from the same paradox. Precision manufacturing meets human error. And each one transformed ordinary metal into mythology. The 1971 S, however, stands apart because it was never meant for circulation. It was crafted for proof sets, polished dies, pristine blanks, perfect conditions. The San Francisco Mint prided itself on its craftsmanship. So when a doubled die slipped through, it represented not just a rare minting error, but a breach in the mint's own definition of perfection. It became, in essence, the beautiful mistake. Here's the fascinating part. Most Americans have never even seen one. Not in museums, not in auctions, not online. The population is that small. Some experts estimate fewer than 24 authentic examples exist, with only a few reaching gem-proof quality. But that scarcity has fueled fascination. Collectors whisper about them in forums and at conventions. Dealers know that the appearance of one can redefine a career. Investors see it as a cultural asset, a compact, portable store of history that grows in value every time it changes hands. And as inflation eats away at traditional assets, the allure of tangible wealth, held in metal, certified by time, only grows stronger. Let's pause for a moment. Think about what a single cent represented in 1971. It could buy a stick of gum, a moment of sweetness. It was, quite literally, the smallest denomination of value in the nation. Now imagine that same coin half a century later, commanding hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's not just about numismatics, it's about transformation. How something so insignificant in the eyes of the world can become an object of obsession, fortune, and pride. It's the same principle that drives art collecting, or investing in rare watches or vintage cars, provenance, rarity, story. But coins carry something deeper. They carry the touch of millions. They've lived in the pockets of workers, soldiers, and presidents alike. So when a collector holds a 1971 S doubled die cent, they aren't just holding copper. They're holding a fragment of America's industrial soul. Still, the question remains, could there be more out there? Every year, new discoveries surface from private collections. Estate sales, old bank bags, unsearched proof sets, each one a possible hiding place for the next great rarity, and that's what keeps collectors awake at night. The thrill that one more might be waiting, still gleaming faintly, untouched, perhaps sitting in a forgotten mint-sealed set from the early 1970s, because history has a habit of resurfacing when least expected. Of course, the market for rare coins isn't just about passion, it's about timing. The coin market, much like fine art, moves in cycles. When economic uncertainty rises, collectors tend to shift toward tangible, historically proven assets. That's why prices for coins like the 1971's double die proof have skyrocketed during times of instability. Investors recognize that these coins are not just collectibles, they're finite commodities. You can print more money, but you can't mint more of these. And as the number of serious collectors grows, particularly younger investors entering the numismatic space, the demand for documented, certified rarities continues to rise, which means the value of a 1971's double die cent, already commanding awe, may still be far from its peak. Now, here's a little-known detail that adds to the intrigue. When these coins were struck, they were part of proof sets sold directly by the U.S. Mint to collectors for just a few dollars. Thousands of those sets still exist, neatly sealed, resting in drawers or safe deposit boxes. Among them, perhaps one holds the next $800,000 cent, waiting for the right set of eyes. It's a modern-day treasure hunt, but the map isn't drawn on parchment. It's written in history, patience, and knowledge. Collectors often talk about the moment, that single heartbeat when they realize what they've found. The subtle difference between ordinary and extraordinary. For one man in California, it came as he examined his father's old proof set under a magnifying glass. He noticed a doubling so crisp it seemed to shimmer. After certification, it became one of the finest known examples ever discovered. He sold it years later, but the story followed him. Because in the world of coins, stories compound value. Every coin carries two prices, the one written on the auction ticket and the one written in human memory. And maybe that's the real message behind the 1971's doubled die Lincoln cent. Not that a single coin can make someone rich, though it can. But that hidden within the smallest artifacts of our daily lives lies the potential for revelation, connection, and legacy. That's what separates those who merely save coins from those who collect them. Collectors don't just accumulate. They preserve, they interpret, they dream. They understand that when you hold a coin, you're holding a conversation between eras. A message from the hands of the past to the hearts of the future. So, the next time you pass a coin jar or dust off an old album, pause. Look closely at those tiny engravings, the delicate mint marks, the mirrored fields, because history doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it hides quietly in copper and patience, and who knows? Perhaps the next legendary 1971's double die proof Lincoln cent is already in your possession, waiting for the light to hit it just right. Because in the world of numismatics, every cent has a story, and some stories are worth far more than gold. Tonight, we open the worn pages of America's pocket-sized history to uncover one such legend, the 1979 Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin. Struck at the Philadelphia Mint, yet mysteriously marked by nothing at all. No letter beneath the date, no clue to its origin. Just the silent confidence of copper that would one day ignite a frenzy among collectors and investors alike. But how could a coin minted by the millions, familiar, ordinary, even dull, rise to command prices in the hundreds of thousands, and in rare cases touch the $1,000,000 mark? That's the secret hiding behind the no-mint-mark Lincoln 1-cent coin of 1979. The year was 1979. The United States was restless. Inflation was rising. Gas lines stretched for blocks, and Americans clutched their wallets a little tighter. Yet within the Philadelphia Mint, presses thundered relentlessly, producing billions of copper-plated coins bearing the face of Abraham Lincoln, the enduring symbol of honesty, resilience, and the nation's moral compass. To the untrained eye, these coins were unremarkable. But numismatists, those patient guardians of American monetary history, understood that every batch of coins carried its own DNA. Slight differences in die alignment, metal composition, and even microscopic engraving details could turn one in a billion into a priceless masterpiece. The Philadelphia Mint, unlike its counterparts in Denver and San Francisco, traditionally left its coins without a mint mark. No P, no D, no S, a minimalist mystery that collectors both loved and hated. It was purity and anonymity in a single strike. Yet in 1979, something peculiar happened. Some Lincoln 1-cent coins from Philadelphia exhibited features that shouldn't have existed. Certain dies were repolished, creating faint double impressions on Lincoln's profile, the word liberty or the date itself. A handful displayed unusual planchet compositions, transitional errors that blurred the line between the copper and zinc eras of American cent production. These weren't just anomalies. They were genetic mutations in the currency bloodstream. And over time, those who spotted them early, sharp-eyed collectors at small-town coin shows or meticulous dealers thumbing through rolls of change found themselves holding small circles of metal that would one day command 6 and even 7 figures. Think about that for a moment. How many 1979 Lincoln cents passed through your hands unrecognized? How many sat in a coffee tin, traded for gum, or lost between couch cushions, never revealing their secret? That question alone keeps collectors awake at night. The coin world thrives on such mysteries. Every discovery reawakens the thrill that somewhere, in the ordinary, lies the extraordinary. And in 1979, that thrill was magnified by the broader changes sweeping through American coinage. By the early 80s, the U.S. Mint was preparing to shift from the rich, reddish hue of copper to the paler tones of zinc-coated steel. The price of copper had risen dramatically, and the humble cent had become too expensive to produce. That meant that the 1979 issue, struck in 95% copper, was among the last of its kind, a farewell to an era of solid metal integrity. For seasoned collectors, that transition marked a psychological turning point. Copper was tangible, substantial. Its weight alone symbolized value. Zinc, by contrast, felt hollow. The 1979 Philadelphia Lincoln cent became, in a sense, the last echo of real money. And in that sentiment lies its mystique. But let's pull the lens closer. What makes certain 1979 no-mint-mark Lincoln 1-cent coins worth thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars, while the rest are still worth just a cent? It all comes down to a blend of rarity, condition, and story. Some examples show an almost ghostly doubling on Lincoln's eyelid, nose, or the date, what experts call a double die obverse. Others display repunched dates or lettering, caused when the die itself was misaligned and corrected manually. And then there are the transitional planchets, coins struck on leftover metal discs intended for a different year or denomination. Each imperfection tells a story of human error, mechanical fatigue, and the relentless pace of minting in an era before full automation. And each story carries a price tag defined not by weight, but by wonder. Auction records reveal that pristine examples, certified by top grading authorities like PCGS or NGC at grades above MS67 red, have fetched values nearing $800,000. A shocking figure for something that once bought a stick of gum. To understand why, we must understand collector psychology. You see, collectors aren't just buying metal, they're buying immortality. Owning a coin like the flawless 1979 no-mint-mark Lincoln 1 cent is to hold a fragment of America's imperfect perfection. It's a bridge between the tangible and the eternal, between history's fingerprints and tomorrow's legacy, and in that connection lies its irresistible power. Here's a twist that many don't know. During the late 1970s, the Philadelphia Mint was experimenting with die life extension, essentially trying to stretch how long a die could be used before replacement. That decision led to subtle die cracks, fading details, and ghost impressions, many of which were scrapped without record. Yet a few made it out. Imagine being the one person who unknowingly received one in change at a grocery store. A faint die crack along the rim, a subtle doubling in Lincoln's portrait, an invisible signature from the past. And today, that forgotten coin might sit in a collector's vault, insured for more than the average home. That's the beauty and torment of coin collecting, the eternal what if. But how do you know if your 1979 Lincoln cent might be the one? Here's the quiet checklist seasoned collectors follow. First, the mint mark, or rather, its absence. The Philadelphia coins of that year have no mint mark below the date. Denver coins marked with a D are common, and San Francisco proofs with an S were struck for collectors. But the no mint mark variety is the one that hides the real treasure. Next, the color. Original mint red coins, unhandled and untarnished, fetch higher premiums than brown or partially toned examples. The difference between red and red-brown in professional grading can mean thousands of dollars. Then the detail. Look for doubling, especially on the inscriptions Liberty and In God We Trust. Subtle shifts or shadow-like impressions may indicate a doubled die. Finally, condition. Every nick, scratch, or smudge can erase thousands from a coin's potential value. Coins preserved in protective holders since 1979, untouched by circulation, are the true survivors. But here's the emotional heart of the story. Many of the great coin discoveries in history weren't made by experts. They were made by ordinary people who took a moment to look closer. A teenager sorting through pocket change, a retired teacher cleaning out an old desk, a collector's grandson flipping through a dusty album. The market may follow trends, but discovery always follows curiosity. In recent years, interest in rare Lincoln cents has surged. The volatility of modern investments has driven many toward tangible assets with emotional resonance: art, watches, and coins. Unlike stocks or digital currencies, a coin is something you can hold, admire, and pass down. It's both wealth and story, a dual legacy that transcends generations. And within that movement, the 1979 no-mint-mark Lincoln 1 cent has become a modern legend. Its market value fluctuates, yes, but its symbolic power only grows. It represents the possibility that history still hides in plain sight, that the overlooked can still astonish. There's another layer to this fascination. Collectors know that every coin tells two stories, the one minted into it and the one it lives afterward. The 1979 cent carries Lincoln's portrait, an emblem of American unity carved during a time of division. The reverse, designed by Victor David Brenner decades earlier, shows the Lincoln Memorial, a symbol of national remembrance. In 1979, that design quietly bridged the 20th century's ideals with the 21st century's uncertainties. And for many investors, that symbolism adds intangible value. The coin doesn't just represent monetary worth. It embodies the enduring promise of resilience and progress. Even when times are hard, maybe that's why collectors call it the silent survivor. It survived economic upheaval, inflation, and obscurity, only to rise decades later as a beacon of hidden fortune. Now here's a thought. How many more silent survivors are still out there? How many coins are dismissed, misjudged, or tossed aside when they might hold secrets worth more than a lifetime of paychecks? That's what keeps the coin community alive, the pursuit of the unknown. Every roll of coins opened, every magnifying glass lifted, is a silent act of faith in discovery. So, if you ever find yourself holding a 1979 Lincoln 1 cent without a mint mark, pause. Study it, feel its weight, examine its color under the light, because you might not just be holding a coin. You might be holding a fragment of history that outlasted empires, economies, and even the passage of time. And if that coin speaks to you, if it calls out from the jingling anonymity of spare change, listen closely. Because sometimes the universe doesn't whisper in words. It whispers in copper. And in that whisper, a story worth $800,000, or perhaps far more, waits to be told. In the end, every collector knows. It's not just about the money. It's about connection. To history, to legacy, to the delicate thread that runs from Abraham Lincoln's era to our own. The 1979 no mint mark Lincoln 1 cent coin isn't just valuable because it's rare. It's valuable because it reminds us that greatness often hides where we least expect it. Small, humble, and waiting patiently for someone who truly sees. Have you ever held a single coin in your hand and wondered, what if this tiny piece of copper could change everything? In 1940, as the United States stood on the edge of war and uncertainty, millions of small, reddish-brown coins rolled off the presses of the Philadelphia Mint. To most Americans, they were simple, common 1 cent pieces, used to buy a stick of gum, a cup of coffee, or a few minutes at the jukebox. But hidden among those billions, a few bare secrets so powerful, they could transform an ordinary collector into a legend. This is the story of the 1940 Lincoln 1 cent coin without a mint. Mark, how an unassuming relic of pre-war America has risen from pocket, changed to a numismatic masterpiece worth over $800,000, and if you think that sounds impossible, wait until you hear why. The year was 1940. Franklin D. Roosevelt had just been elected for a third term. The nation was healing from the Great Depression, but a storm was brewing across the Atlantic. In times like those, the mint's work carried a quiet symbolism: stability, trust, endurance. The Lincoln 1-cent coin, bearing the humble image of Abraham Lincoln and the words, "In God We Trust," had become more than just currency. It was a promise that America would endure. Philadelphia, the mother mint, produced hundreds of millions of these 1-cent coins that year. No mint mark appeared beneath the date, because Philadelphia didn't use one at the time. That small omission, that lack of letter, has become a fascination in itself. Most of these coins were struck quickly and circulated endlessly, losing their sharp detail to years of handling pockets and drawers. But among them, a handful emerged that defied time. Coins with nearly perfect strikes, flawless surfaces, and deep red luster. Survivors in an age when survival itself was uncertain. And in the world of numismatics, survival is value. So why is a 1940 no-mint mark Lincoln 1-cent worth hundreds of thousands of dollars? The answer is layered: in history, rarity, and something far more elusive: condition. You see, a coin's worth isn't just about its age or its design. It's about how it was preserved. A 1940 Lincoln cent with even a trace of oxidation or a dull patina might be worth only a few cents. But a coin with its original fiery copper brilliance, untouched by air, human hands, or time, becomes something transcendent. The most prized examples, graded as Mint State 67 or higher by professional services like PCGS or NGC, command astronomical prices at auction. In one instance, a 1940 Lincoln 1-cent from Philadelphia sold for nearly $841,000, not because it was an error, not because it had a missing design element, but because it was perfect. Absolute perfection, frozen in copper, from a year when the world was anything but perfect. Let's pause here for a moment. What makes collectors chase something like this? Why do people pay the price of a luxury home for a coin that once bought a stick of gum? The answer lies deep within human nature. Coin collecting isn't just a hobby, it's a dialogue between past and future. Every collector, consciously or not, is searching for connection. To a story, to a time, to a piece of themselves. The 1940 no-mint mark, Lincoln 1-cent, represents stability in chaos, artistry in mass production, and wealth hidden in plain sight. It whispers to the collector, "What else could you be overlooking?" And that whisper is irresistible. But let's peel back another layer, one most people overlook. In the 1940s, coin production in Philadelphia faced incredible pressure. Metal supply chains were tightening as the nation prepared for war. Quality control varied from press to press, and dies wore quickly under the strain of heavy output. That's why a perfect strike from that year is such a miracle. The chances of a flawless coin surviving from a run of hundreds of millions? Infinitesimal. Even rarer still are examples struck with subtle anomalies, tiny die cracks, doubled features, or off-center strikes. To the untrained eye, they're imperfections. But to a seasoned numismatist, they're fingerprints of history, unique signatures that can multiply a coin's value tenfold. One particularly famous specimen, discovered in the 1980s, showed microscopic doubling in the word liberty. The collector who recognized it didn't just find a coin, he found a legacy. There's something poetic about that, isn't there? In a world where everything feels digital, temporary, and mass-produced, a small copper disc from 1940 becomes a symbol of permanence. The patina of time gives it character. Its imperfections tell a story, and in that story, collectors find meaning. Ask any serious numismatist, and they'll tell you, the thrill isn't only in the possession, it's in the pursuit. The hours spent inspecting coins under magnification, the quiet heartbeat when you spot a variation that others missed, the realization that history has chosen you as its next guardian. Because make no mistake, rare coins aren't just investments. They're inheritances. They outlive us. They whisper our values forward through generations. That's why a coin like the 1940 no-mint-mark Lincoln 1 cent isn't just valued in dollars. It's valued in legacy. Here's something few people know. During the 1940s, the composition of the Lincoln cent was changing subtly. Although the official formula remained 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, small wartime variations occurred in trace elements, affecting the color and texture. Collectors can often detect these differences by tone alone. Some pieces glow with deep crimson, others with soft brown hues or iridescent reflection. To the market, these tonal differences can mean thousands of dollars. A coin with strong red coloration, graded as red by certification, standards can triple or even quadruple in value over a coin of identical strike but duller hue. That's why when a 1940 Philadelphia Lincoln 1 cent emerged in pristine red, full luster shimmering like new copper wire, it ignites a bidding war. Now, imagine being the person who finds one. You're sorting through an old inherited jar, coins your grandfather collected or maybe just saved without thinking. You spot a 1940 Lincoln cent and it gleams differently. The surfaces are clean, the edges sharp, the fields mirror-like. You decide to have it graded. Weeks later, you receive the result. MS67 red, then comes the shock. Auction houses start calling. Emails flood in. That coin you almost spent on coffee could now be worth nearly $1 million. And suddenly, you understand what every collector dreams about, the discovery. Of course, not every coin holds that kind of fortune. But the psychology of the hunt, the possibility that one might, is what fuels this timeless pursuit. Collectors today aren't just investors. They're historians, storytellers, detectives, and the market has noticed. Over the past decade, demand for high-grade Lincoln cents has surged, driven by both nostalgia and strategic wealth preservation. As inflation erodes the value of paper assets, tangible relics, especially those tied to America's story, have gained renewed respect. Coin funds, private investors, and legacy planners are entering the market not just for profit, but for permanence. In an uncertain economy, a tangible piece of American metal feels safer than a line of code on a screen. And among all those coins, the 1940 no-mint-mark Lincoln. 1 cent remains a beacon, a humble reminder that sometimes the most valuable treasures are the ones we overlook. Here's a curious twist. Even though Philadelphia struck over 500 million of these coins, the number of top-condition survivors is estimated to be fewer than 200. Think about that. Out of hundreds of millions, only a few dozen might still exist in near-perfect, mint-fresh state. That's rarer than many gold coins, and yet they're hidden in boxes, collections, or estate drawers across America, quietly waiting for rediscovery. Every collector watching this right now might already own one. They just haven't looked closely enough. So, what does this all mean for you? It means opportunity doesn't always look like gold or silver. Sometimes it's a humble copper coin, tarnished by time but rich in story. It means history still hides in our homes, in jars, in inherited collections. And it means that those who take the time to learn, to look deeper, can still uncover treasures that others overlook. Because the real magic of coin collecting isn't about metal, it's about transformation. The transformation of curiosity into knowledge, of history into wealth, of an ordinary object into a legacy. So the next time you see a 1940 Lincoln 1 cent without a mint mark, don't dismiss it. Hold it to the light. Study its details. Imagine the hands it's passed through, the history it's witnessed. Ask yourself, what if this is one of the few that survived perfectly? What if this is my discovery? Because every great fortune begins with a moment of curiosity. And sometimes that moment fits in the palm of your hand. The 1940 no-mint-mark Lincoln 1 cent, born in the heart of a turbulent America, forgotten for decades, now reborn as one of the most desired treasures in modern numismatics. From a symbol of everyday commerce to a cornerstone of legacy, it reminds us that even the smallest pieces of history can hold the greatest value. And perhaps, just perhaps, your next priceless find is already waiting in your pocket. Yes, a simple Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin from 1946, struck in Philadelphia with no mint mark, has shaken the world of numismatics with a value that once climbed beyond $835,000 at private auction. But why? Why would a post-war cent, seemingly identical to the billions made, be coveted like a lost relic of the nation's wealth? The answer lies not only in its metal and markings, but in the invisible hands of history that shaped it. The year was 1946. The United States stood tall, victorious after World War II, yet scarred by its cost. Copper had been rationed, melted into shells and wire for the war effort. During the conflict, the U.S. Mint experimented with steel-plated zinc cents, those dull, silvery coins of 1943 that confused countless shopkeepers and children alike. When peace returned, so did the familiar reddish glow of copper. But the transition wasn't smooth. The mint had leftover steel planchets, experimental dies, and worn machinery being recalibrated after years of wartime production. In this storm of change, minting anomalies, tiny, nearly invisible, were born. Among these were a handful of 1946 Lincoln 1-cent coins that defied expectation. Some carried no mint mark, suggesting they hailed from the Philadelphia Mint. But closer inspection hinted at mysteries deeper than missing letters. Collectors have long whispered of Philadelphia cents that shimmered, differently under light, struck on leftover bronze or transitional planchets. Others seemed to bear faint traces of repunched dates or doubled features on Lincoln's profile. But the most shocking discovery came when a private collector, sifting through an old tobacco tin of wartime coins, noticed a peculiar tone, deeper, more lustrous, almost like gold. That coin, authenticated and graded under intense scrutiny, would later command $835,000 in a private sale. The story spread quietly at first, through collector conventions and small-town coin clubs. It wasn't the kind of tale you'd see on the evening news. But in the world of serious numismatists, it was an earthquake, because it wasn't just about the coin's metal or grade. It was about what it represented, a mistake that shouldn't exist, surviving when logic said it couldn't. If you think about it, every rare coin carries a kind of paradox. The more ordinary it looks, the more dangerous it becomes to ignore. Imagine this. Somewhere in your family's attic, in an old coffee jar or drawer of forgotten change, a 1946 Lincoln cent sits quietly, untouched for decades. Its edges slightly dulled, its color aged into that rich reddish-brown patina collectors dream about. To the untrained eye, it's worth 1 cent. To the right buyer, it could fund a retirement, pay off a home, or change a life's direction forever. But here's the twist. You'll never know its worth by sight alone. These coins demand scrutiny, the kind of deep, patient examination that separates collectors from casual observers. Under magnification, a true numismatist looks for the dance of imperfections, the die cracks that tell a story of machinery under stress, the doubling on the date that speaks of hurried wartime minting, or the subtle metallic variations hinting at leftover alloys from prior years. It's a treasure hunt for the soul as much as the wallet. Have you ever wondered why people risk fortunes for coins that can fit on a fingertip? Because coins are the DNA of civilization. They outlive empires, presidents, and even paper money. Every Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin struck after 1909 carries not just Lincoln's face, but a whisper of America's identity, its values, its struggles, its constant reinvention. The 1946 Philadelphia cent, in particular, stands at the crossroads of that story. It's the first full year after the war, when hope returned, when industry surged, and when America began dreaming big again. Yet within that optimism lay chaos in the mint, transitional materials, new dyes, and exhausted machines. So when you hold a 1946 cent, you're not just holding metal. You're holding evidence of rebirth, minted by hands still trembling from the memory of war. And yet, why are some of these coins worth more than gold? Why do investors and collectors alike chase them with such obsession? Because rarity in numismatics is never just about numbers. It's about survivability, story, and timing. Tens of millions of 1946 Lincoln cents were minted, but only a microscopic fraction show the anomalies that make them legendary. Some were struck on leftover bronze planchets from earlier years. Others exhibit doubled dies, misaligned strikes, or ghost-like remnants of mint marks that were never meant to exist. The coin that sold for over $800,000 was believed to have been struck on an experimental transitional planchet, possibly intended for testing purposes before official copper production resumed. That alone makes it a tangible fragment of U.S. mint history, one of those happy accidents collectors dream of discovering once in a lifetime. There's also a deeper, psychological pull at work. Coin collectors, especially those who invest, are driven by two emotions, nostalgia and control. Nostalgia connects them to the past, a time when coins jingled in pockets, when craftsmanship mattered, when history was minted in metal, not digital code. Control, on the other hand, comes from owning something finite in an infinite world. While markets fluctuate and paper currencies lose value, a genuine 1946 no-mint mark Lincoln cent with verifiable anomalies becomes a fortress of wealth, portable, private, and permanent. That's why seasoned investors are quietly shifting part of their portfolios into numismatic assets. It's not just about collecting, it's about legacy. You can't pass down a stock certificate to your grandchildren and expect awe. But pass down a coin that survived the mint's post-war chaos, a coin that could buy a house, and you've handed them a story they'll tell for generations. Here's where the mystery deepens. Not all 1946 no-mint mark cents are created equal. The vast majority are common, worth only face value or a few dollars in pristine condition. The valuable ones carry subtle markers, a slightly off metal composition, die doubling on the date, or minute differences in strike pressure. Experts often test the metal composition to detect bronze planchets with higher tin or zinc content, which indicate transitional pieces. Some coins also weigh a fraction less than standard copper cents, a clue to their rarity, but even professional graders occasionally miss the signs. That's why collectors are obsessed with second opinions, X-ray fluorescence tests, and deep spectral scans. In the upper echelons of coin collecting, authenticity isn't proven by appearance, it's proven by science. And then there's the art of timing. Coin values rise and fall with cultural waves. A coin might sit dormant for years, then suddenly skyrocket when media attention or a major auction reignites interest. The $835,000 sale wasn't just a reflection of rarity, it was the spark that turned a whisper into legend. After that sale, the market for mid-century Lincoln cents saw a surge. Search traffic spiked. Coin roll hunters began combing through 1940s rolls like gold prospectors. Dealers reported being flooded with inquiries. How can I tell if mine's the one? That's the beauty and the madness of the numismatic world. It takes only one discovery to rewrite what collectors thought they knew. Picture this. You're at a local flea market. A vendor sells you a small cardboard flip with an old coin taped inside, a 1946 Lincoln cent, worn but warm to the touch. Maybe you buy it for nostalgia, or maybe it's just a hunch. Later, at home, under your loupe and light, something looks off. The date seems doubled. The rim has a strange raised edge. The sound it makes when dropped isn't quite the usual copper ping. What would you do? Would you shrug it off? Or would you chase the possibility that you've just stumbled upon a six-figure relic? That's how it happens. Not in banks or museums, but in quiet, private moments of discovery. Every collector remembers their first coin that made their heart race. There's a saying among numismatists. The rarest coins aren't found. They reveal themselves when you're ready to recognize them. Maybe that's why the story of the 1946 no-mint mark Lincoln cent resonates so deeply. It reminds us that greatness often hides in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to look closer. And maybe it's also a metaphor for America itself, a nation built on the idea that even the smallest, most unassuming things can carry immense value when you understand their history. So, the next time you come across an old jar of coins, don't dismiss it. Don't assume every cent is just a cent, because within that copper sea could lie a survivor from 1946, a relic from the first peaceful year after global chaos, carrying secrets no machine could replicate again. It might be tarnished, scratched, even a little forgotten. But remember, the rarest treasures rarely announce themselves. In a world obsessed with speed and surface, coin collecting asks us to slow down and see, to study, to imagine the hands that made, spent, and saved each piece. And in doing so, you're not just collecting metal, you're collecting stories, power, and time itself. So whether you're an investor seeking tangible legacy or a dreamer chasing whispers of the past, the 1946 no-mint mark Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin stands as proof that fortune still hides in the ordinary. Somewhere out there, one more of these coins might be waiting to be found, perhaps in a jar, a drawer, or a forgotten pocket. The question is, when it reveals itself, will you recognize it? Because sometimes, the difference between a penny and a fortune is simply knowing what you're holding. The year was 1955. America was humming with post-war optimism. The highways were new, television was king, and a young rock and roll singer named Elvis Presley was beginning to shake the nation's spirit. In Denver, the mint's heavy presses thundered day and night, spitting out copper coins by the millions. Each bore the stoic profile of Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president, a symbol of integrity and endurance. But in one fateful batch, something went wrong. As the dies were prepared for striking, one obverse die, the side bearing Lincoln's portrait and the word Liberty, shifted ever so slightly. A misalignment between the die and the planchet created what numismatists now call a doubled die error. The letters, the date, even the president's image appeared to shimmer, ghost-like, as if the coin carried two realities at once. Most of these errors were caught and destroyed. But not all. A handful slipped through the quality checks, tucked into the streams of commerce, passed from bank to bakery, from gas station to grocery store. People spent them, never realizing that they were holding one of the rarest and most mysterious minting errors in American history. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. The 1955 doubled die from the Philadelphia Mint is legendary, one of the most famous errors ever. But the 1955 Denver Mint issue? That's the ghost of the collection world. For decades, it's been whispered about among serious collectors, those who track auction records, who study die varieties under microscopes, who know that the real treasures are rarely the ones you see in glossy magazines. A 1955 Denver Mint Lincoln cent, showing a dramatic die error or unique minting anomaly, has crossed auction blocks with figures that defy belief. Numbers like $829,000 attached to a coin born from a mistake. Imagine, a coin that once rested in a dusty pocket, now worth more than most homes. But here's what few understand about coins like these. Their value isn't just about rarity, it's about story. Every coin has a voice, but few speak louder than the ones that weren't supposed to exist. Collectors, especially those who've been in the game long enough to feel its emotional rhythm, know that chasing coins isn't about greed. It's about connection. Connecting to a moment in time, to a craftsman's unnoticed slip, to a piece of history that somehow survived against all odds. The 1955 D. Lincoln cent embodies that. It's the physical manifestation of imperfection turned into immortality. Think of it this way. In a world obsessed with digital assets and fleeting trends, these small copper discs endure. They outlast economies, presidencies, even generations. They remind us that legacy isn't built in a day. It's forged, struck, and circulated until its story becomes undeniable. The market has felt this shift in recent years. As inflation eats at modern currency, tangible heritage has become a new gold rush. Rare American coins, especially mid-century errors like this 1955 Denver minting, are quietly being scooped up by investors who understand that scarcity and narrative together create unstoppable value. We've seen the proof: private sales, hushed deals, auction houses stunned when a 1-cent coin jumps from a modest 5 figures into the realm of hundreds of thousands. And those who once dismissed coin collecting as an old man's hobby are beginning to realize This is legacy wealth disguised as pocket change. You might be wondering, how do you know if you have one? Well, this is where the real thrill begins. The genuine 1955 Denver Mint Lincoln. Cent showing a double die or off-center strike will display subtle distortions. Look closely at the inscriptions, "In God We Trust" and "Liberty." The letters might appear shadowed, as if the coin itself were trembling. Under magnification, the doubling reveals itself like a secret signature left by time. But here's the danger. The market is flooded with counterfeits, cleverly manipulated fakes made to mimic the genuine error. True experts, those who live and breathe numismatics, can spot the difference through the weight, the strike sharpness, and the texture of the copper alloy. For those who hold one verified by a reputable grading service, say PCGS or NGC, the certificate is more than paper. It's proof of legacy. Every serious collector eventually faces a crossroads. Do you chase the coins everyone talks about, or do you hunt the ones that people whisper about? The 1955 D Lincoln cent belongs to the latter category, the whispered legends. The kind of coin that surfaces once in a generation, sending ripples through collector circles. It's the reason seasoned investors attend auctions with quiet hearts and trembling hands. Because sometimes, history decides to show up in the smallest form imaginable, a copper disc, smaller than a quarter. That can change a life. But why does this matter now in 2025? Because history repeats itself. Every major surge in the rare coin market has followed periods of uncertainty. The 1970s inflation spike, the tech bubble, the pandemic years. In each case, tangible assets, coins, precious metals, fine art, surged as people sought something real. And once again, we're seeing collectors turn toward mid-20th century coins, especially those struck in error. The demand for mint-state examples, especially with verified provenance, has skyrocketed. Auction catalogs that once listed a few notable cents now dedicate entire sections to varieties of the 1955 D Lincoln cent. Investors aren't just buying coins, they're buying the right to own a story that will outlive them. But let's step back for a moment. What makes someone pay nearly $1 million for a coin they'll likely never spend, never use, and perhaps never even hold with bare hands? It's not greed. It's reverence. When you buy a coin like this, you're not purchasing metal. You're acquiring a moment that slipped through history's fingers. You're honoring the mint worker who caught an error too late, the banker who passed it along unknowingly, the child who may have spent it on candy without realizing he held a fortune. That's what numismatics really is. A grand treasure hunt guided by fate and patience. And here's the paradox that fascinates collectors the most. The more people search for the 1955 D Lincoln cent, the rarer it becomes. Because every discovery locks another one away in private hands, vaulted, protected, and cherished. What circulates in the open market diminishes year by year. That scarcity drives both emotion and price. Each public sale becomes a spectacle, a brief window where the world is reminded that even a 1-cent coin can rewrite the rules of value. Imagine yourself walking through an estate sale, boxes of old coins, a few tarnished pieces, the faint smell of history in the air. Your hand brushes against a copper coin, and there it is, a 1955 D with subtle doubling on Lincoln's face. Your heart skips. Because in that moment, you're not just holding copper, you're holding destiny. That's the dream that fuels the entire collector community. The quiet hope that something extraordinary lies hidden in the ordinary. That maybe, just maybe, you'll be the one to uncover what others missed. Even if you never find one, understanding its story changes how you see every coin that passes through your hand. You begin to notice the small details, the serif of a letter, the crispness of a rim, the alignment of the date. You start to realize that every coin, no matter how common, is a fragment of a grand American chronicle, a story struck in metal, designed to last longer than memory. And that's the heart of collecting. It's not about hoarding. It's about preserving. It's about telling the next generation, this was once just a penny, but now it tells a story about America, about human error, about resilience, about the magic of chance. So, when you hear that a 1955 D mintmark Lincoln 1-cent coin sold for over $829,000, remember, it's not luck. It's the inevitable rise of meaning meeting rarity. Because in every collector's journey, there's a turning point. A moment when you stop chasing profit and start chasing history. When you realize the true wealth of a coin isn't in its market price, but in the sense of wonder it awakens. 1 cent. That's all it took to remind us that even the smallest pieces of metal can hold the weight of centuries. And perhaps that's the real message of the 1955 D, Lincoln cent. That mistakes, when preserved, become masterpieces. That the line between flaw and fortune is thinner than we imagine. And that sometimes the greatest treasures are already in our possession. We just haven't looked closely enough. So the next time you reach for spare change, pause. Feel the texture, study the date, look closer than you ever have before, because history doesn't always sit in museums. Sometimes it hides in your pocket, and if you're lucky, just lucky enough, you might find a 1955 D Lincoln 1-cent coin whispering its secret story of copper, chance and legacy worth far more than gold. 1958 was the twilight of a design that had already become an American icon. For nearly half a century, the humble Lincoln wheat ear reverse, those twin stalks framing the nation's promise, had jingled through the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and the birth of the atomic age. Most coins from that year were produced at the Philadelphia Mint, the nation's oldest and most historic coining facility, proudly stamping its creations without a mint mark. They were ordinary in every sense, or so it seemed. But numismatics, much like history itself, hides its legends in the smallest of details. Because in 1958, somewhere deep within the Philadelphia Mint, a mistake occurred. A misalignment between dies, a duplication in engraving, an unintentional echo of craftsmanship that wasn't meant to exist. And from that subtle slip of human hands emerged one of the rarest Lincoln 1-cent coins in American history, the 1958 double-die obverse. Now, at first glance, it looks just like every other copper cent of its time. But look closer, at the word liberty, at In God We Trust, and at the date 1958 itself. You'll see something hauntingly beautiful, a doubled impression, each letter shadowed by a ghostly twin, as if the coin carries 2 histories layered upon one another. Only 3 confirmed examples of this error have ever been authenticated by the professional coin grading service. Just 3 out of hundreds of millions struck. Each one a survivor, a microscopic marvel of metal and time. And when one of them surfaced at auction, the numismatic world held its breath. The hammer fell at over $819,000 for a single Lincoln 1-cent coin with no mint mark. Think about that. A coin that could have bought you a piece of bubble gum in 1958, now capable of buying an entire home. But why such value? Why does the world of coin collecting, a community built on metal and minting, treat this small copper piece like a relic of royalty? Because rarity alone doesn't make a legend. Its meaning that does. Collectors see in this coin a paradox, the marriage of flaw and perfection. The doubling error that would normally mark a failure instead became a signature, a fingerprint of fate. It tells a story not of machinery, but of human imperfection immortalized in copper. And for those who invest in legacy, who collect not for quick profit but for permanence, such stories are priceless. But here's where the plot thickens. You see, the 1958 double-die obverse isn't just valuable for its rarity. It represents the closing chapter of an era. 1 year later, in 1959, the wheat ear reverse was retired, replaced by the Lincoln Memorial design, a modern, architectural tribute to the 16th president. This change marked the end of America's longest-running cent design, and with it, the symbolic close of a post-war chapter in U.S. coinage. So, when collectors hold that 1958 1-cent coin, they're not just holding copper. They're holding the last heartbeat of the wheat ear legacy, and perhaps, unknowingly, the rarest echo of its existence. Now imagine this. You're sifting through a forgotten jar of change left by your grandparents, coins tarnished by time but rich with memory. Among the dull browns and fading reds, you pick up a 1958 piece. No mint mark, Ordinary at first glance. But then, as light glances across its surface, you notice the letters seem doubled, slightly off. Your pulse quickens, you pull out a magnifying glass. You align the rim under the glow of a desk lamp. And there it is, Liberty. And in God we trust shimmering with that unmistakable doubled strike. In that instant, you're no longer just a hobbyist. You've become the discoverer of buried treasure, a modern-day prospector mining history's leftovers for golden opportunity. That moment, that mix of disbelief, thrill, and reverence is the emotional core of coin collecting. The possibility that within something so small lies a story vast enough to alter your life. But make no mistake, finding one of these elusive coins is like finding lightning in a bottle. Most experts agree that all known examples are already accounted for, each locked behind layers of security in private collections or museum vaults. Still, the possibility lingers because history loves to surprise us. Even today, previously unknown rarities continue to surface, often from estate sales, inherited collections, or dusty boxes tucked away in basements. Each discovery reignites the collective imagination of the numismatic world, reminding us that not every secret has been uncovered. Could another 1958 doubled die still be out there? Perhaps. And for collectors, perhaps is enough to keep the hunt alive. Here's a secret few outside the inner circle of coin dealers understand. The coin market doesn't just follow supply and demand, it follows story. When a coin has a story that captures emotion, mystery, beauty, tragedy, or triumph, its value compounds far beyond metal or mintage. Investors buy coins like this not just for profit, but for prestige, legacy, and the thrill of possessing something virtually unattainable. That's why the elite of the collecting world compete for pieces like the 1958 no mintmark Lincoln 1 cent with the double die obverse. It's not just a coin. It's an heirloom of American error, a fragment of minting mythology. Every great numismatic collection needs its crown jewel. And this is the one most will only dream of owning. But let's step back and consider what this phenomenon teaches us. Coin collecting isn't just about accumulation. It's about observation. The true collector develops an eye, a sensitivity to nuance, a reverence for craftsmanship. They study patinas, die marks, and subtle variances that others overlook. They don't see coins. They see stories etched in metal, and sometimes those stories are worth millions. It's a quiet form of rebellion in a world obsessed with digital currency and instant gratification. To hold a 1958 copper cent is to feel permanence, the weight of something that outlasted the headlines, the presidents, the trends, and even the paper money that surrounded it. It's a reminder that wealth, real wealth, is often built on what others discard. Now, here's a question to stir your imagination. What if the most valuable coin you'll ever own isn't locked in a vault, but resting in a forgotten coffee can in your attic? What if, while others scroll through cryptocurrency charts, your fortune lies in a 2-inch circle of copper minted before you were born? For some, that's just a dream. For others, it's already reality, because every once in a while history reaches out, quietly, unexpectedly, and rewards those who were paying attention. And that's the deeper message of the 1958 no mintmark Lincoln 1 cent coin. It's not just a numismatic anomaly. It's a parable about value itself, about how imperfections, when rare enough, become beauty. How the smallest errors can leave the greatest. Legacies, the Philadelphia mint workers who struck. That coin likely never knew their day's labor would someday produce one of the most coveted pieces in U.S. history. They couldn't have guessed that a misalignment of steel and pressure would create a coin that future generations would pursue like a holy grail. Yet here we are, 70 years later, still talking about it, still searching for it, still dreaming about the day we might uncover another. So if you ever find yourself with a handful of old coins, slow down, feel the edges. Examine the details, because the next great discovery in American numismatics may not come from a high-tech lab or a billion-dollar vault. It may come from you. That's the timeless allure of collecting, the fusion of knowledge, intuition, and fate. Each coin tells a story. Some tell of empires and revolutions. Others, Like the 1958 Lincoln 1 cent, whisper of error turned to excellence, of a nation's craftsmanship frozen in a rare moment of imperfection. And if you listen closely enough, you just might hear that whisper calling your name. The market may fluctuate. Gold may rise and fall. Digital trends may come and go. But the value of legacy, of owning a tangible fragment of America's story, remains unshakable. The 1958 double-die cent is more than a coin. It's a testament to patience, to observation, to the eternal truth that sometimes the smallest things hold the greatest worth. So keep your eyes open, because the next time you hear the clink of loose change, you might just be holding history's most valuable mistake.